Welcome to my budget deck channel, where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if you're interested in this, might want to check out my channel or subscribe. I had a look at Security Force today, and this is a deck that I actually wanted to wait a bit before posting it, because this deck will receive new support eventually, who knows, in Master Duel, but the TCG and I think the OCG already have the cards out, and they are going to make this deck a lot better than it already is. So I kind of wanted to wait, but this deck actually plays quite well in the Fusion Festival, which is why I want to upload this now, and I can still upload an updated version at one point if it's then not too expensive for a budget deck channel. First of all, if you want to play it in the Fusion Festival event, then just cut the whole extra deck. I know the deck has a Link monster, but originally I didn't even decide to run it in this deck because you technically do not need it for the strategy. Don't get me wrong, it does a lot, but you kind of have to get rid of 3 monsters on your board, and I've made a Go Second version where this actually comes up more because there's certain cards that actually synergize with this a bit better that I might showcase at a different kind of time if someone's interested. But this specific version, especially because it's going first, you don't really put up your Link monster going first that much. It has a negate, but it's not that easy getting 3 monsters on board. It's okay the way you play it. If you don't want to run it in general, then you don't have to. Especially for the Fusion event, it doesn't make that much of a difference. The big difference that it makes is it's very hard for you to get over certain attack point value. You can get your opponent's monsters' attack points down by quite a bit, but if some monsters have like more than 3,000 attack or even less, more than 2,800, you're gonna have a very bad time with this deck, which can be annoying. But you see a trap lineup that goes till infinity and beyond. It should make you be able to beat these kind of decks as well eventually. If they're not protected from destruction and targeting, then you have a really terrible time. You could run certain rank 4s like Utopia Double if you like, helps you in a lot of situations. Didn't want to include it because it's not really budgety and you don't need to, but you certainly can. Obviously not for the Fusion event or any other kind of event that's not rank, well, Xyz event for that matter. But starting out with the actual card ratios, triple S4's Rapachiyomaru, because this card is your main playmaker, and you can already see you run a card in the deck that is a bit strange, which is Reinforced Truth. It is only in here to get this card out during your opponent's turn. You could swap this out when play double Idia, the Heavenly Squire, because for some reason Chiyomaru actually perfectly fits in with the attack and defense stat value that you need to summon it off of Idia. The thing with Idia is you cannot get rid of Idia because you then cannot summon monsters from your extra deck, which is a bit annoying. So you leave yourself open by having an 800 attack point monster on board, which enables so many ways your opponent can OTK you. A lot of the time stuff like Access Code Talker doesn't really care if it's in defense or attack position, but for example Utopia Double will just run over it. So this can be problematic, but since you run so many trap cards, it's fine. I kind of liked that you could summon it during your opponent's turn. It has the downside though that then you cannot search your trap by summoning out your Gravitino, which would be a card that you would maybe want to be summoning during your turn so you can actually search the trap. So if you feel more comfortable running Idia, then you could go for this instead of Reinforce Truth. Next up, one Ash Blossom, because basically every player has it and it's a very good card. I run a triple S-Force Aura Fist. I know this isn't usually what people would be doing. People probably run it at 2 or 1, I assume. Even before I think the new cards come out, this wasn't played like at 3 most of the time. I do like it though, because it's a normal summon, so if you don't have anything else in hand but this, you can normal summon this card and still do stuff. It's a level 4, so if you want to go for rank 4 stuff, this works pretty well in conjunction with S4's Edge Razor. And also this card is one of the only cards that actually still interacts with your opponent, which is quite nice. So I don't feel like it's too bad. The cost for destroying one opponent's monster if they activate the effect by banishing an S-Force monster or card from your hand is quite steep though, so usually you don't really want to use this to annoy your opponent, but actually more go for the Gravitino into trap and whatnot set up. So it's a bit iffy, but I do like it at 3, but you don't have to play it at 3 if you don't like to. S4's Edge Razor helps you go into your extra deck, also helps you fill up your zones because columns are quite important in this deck, and this is quite neat to actually get your opponent's extra monster zones covered a bit if you're playing against link decks, for example. And in general, it can facilitate some OTK-ish things, finish games by summoning stuff out. Even if you go with Chiyomaru in the battle phase, use the effect, summon out Edge Razor from your deck in defense position, obviously, because you have to. But then the card that you have in hand, you can summon out from well, in attack position, so you can actually keep attacking with this. If you then summon stuff out like Platina, you can summon another card from your banished zone and so on. So you actually can fill the board quite well, especially in the later game stage, which is why this thought maybe run triple Platina, because in the grind game, this can be a bit of an issue, but I will talk about this in a second. You obviously run a triple S-Force Gravitino because this is your searcher, searches you any S-Force card, which is very, very strong. Mainly you will be searching the main trap card, but you can search any other card as well. S-Force Dog Tag, a card you do not have to run. This deck does quite well without it, because at first the effect looked actually quite strong, but then you realize it's during your main phase your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters in the same column, which makes it significantly worse because it's quite hard to get out during your turn. And at this point then it usually doesn't matter too much anymore. It's still a card you could consider running at 1, especially because you can summon it out when your opponent summons a monster, so you can match that column for your other effects, which Gravitino is quite important, because every monster that would go to the graveyard is banished instead, which is nice if it's in the same column. So this covers your opponent's column for a while, which can be quite important. S-Force Platina, a card that summons from your banish zone, which is pretty easy to do, since if you want to activate certain card effects, you actually have to banish an S-Force card, which then helps you going into these kind of Platina setups. I like the card at 2, but 3 would sometimes be better in this specific version as well. You have to make the decision by yourself. I felt like 2 worked the best, but there were duels where I was like, wish I had a third one in my deck right now. Reinforcement of the Army, another way to search your Chiyomaru because it's a level 2 warrior monster. S-Force Bridgehead, good card to search any of your S-Force monsters from your hand. The other effect is not really that important. It doesn't do all that much for the deck. Sometimes comes in handy, but yeah, it's not the greatest effect, but it's an effect and it's on the card. Plus this card is a searcher, so why wouldn't you play it at 3? You could run a terraforming if you want to, but you do not have to. Forbidden Chalice, great card going second, great card going first. Obviously replace this with good hand traps, Maxi, Infinite Impermanence, all these kind of cards are a lot stronger than this most of the time, so keep that in mind. But this is a budget deck profile. Next card I run at 3 mainly because of the name, because you need S-Force cards in this deck, otherwise you will have problems. And this card comes into play in certain situations because you can actually recycle stuff like Platina from your graveyard, which is why I decided not to go for a Dimensional Fissure. I know a lot of people play this card, and this card is quite devastating, especially against certain amount of decks, and this specific deck doesn't really care too much about it, but there were times where I wished I had not played it, because if your opponent doesn't really care about it, then it harms yourself at least as much as your opponent, and then this card is a complete dead card. In the grind game, getting one of your S-Force monsters back from your graveyard can actually be somewhat crucial. It's a stupid reason for not running triple Dimensional Fissure, or at least 2 or whatever, but I just felt like this card conflicted with it too many times in testing that I decided to cut Dimensional Fissure, but that is fully up to you. I gave you the option. If you want to play a Dimensional Fissure, then that's fine. You can obviously run it with S-Force Showdown, as most people would, and replace it with some other kind of trap cards that you do not like as much. Torrential Tribute, a card that is designed to keep you in game if your opponent gets rid of your setup, or if you don't have a good setup turn 1. Then, because if you don't have a good setup turn 1, then hopefully you maybe do into Torrential Tribute, can stall your opponent for a turn, and then keep going again. It's just a very strong budgety kind of card that I like to use in my control variants, because it can actually buy you a whole turn, which can be crucial. Compulsory Evacuation Device is in here because in combination with Gravitino, it can actually banish your opponent's monster, and you don't have to pay any cost, no discards, no life point costs, no whatnots, no conditions. So I felt like the card was actually quite neat, and also in general it's quite good against extra deck monsters because it doesn't destroy, still targets, which is problematic. Already talked about Reinforced Truth. If you want to run EDI instead, that is fine. Lost Wind, a card that is very good in the grind game, resets itself, especially in the fusion event. This can come in very, very handy. Would definitely run it at 2 because this is a very controlsy and very strong card. S4's Specimen at 2. Could bump it down to 1 if you like, but since you go for a more control variant with this kind of style of deck, being able to summon cards back from your banished zone or from your graveyard can actually be quite nice. And also the moving effect it's not too bad, but this card has one massive problem, and that is you have to special summon it into a field in the same column as your opponent's monster. So if your opponent doesn't have any monsters, you cannot do this, and if the zone is already occupied, you also cannot do this. So this could be a reason for why you'd only want to play it at 1. S4's Chase, one of the best cards of the deck. You can get rid of multiple cards in combination with Gravitino. You can actually banish loads of your opponent's monsters, which is quite nice. And also you can use this card when it's in the graveyard to use for Chiyomaru's effect, for example, or for Aura Fist's effect, which is also quite important actually. So on Solemn Judgment, because this card is strong and it's a control deck, so I would run it if you have it, but you can also decide to go for different hand traps and what other kind of things come to mind. Caught by the Grave, technically somewhat of an important card in the deck because Ash Blossom is a bit annoying for it. Well, you have to deal with it. If it comes up, then that's annoying, I assume. For the extra deck, mainly just cheap rank 4s, rank 2s. Could even go for stuff like rank 5s because you have your Gravitino that you could have double with. Probably not wanting to go for rank 6, but you could. It can come up. It did come up a few times for me, so that is fine. And the rest is just link stuff that you probably don't really need. Do you need your Transversus, a cheap link monster? But if you have any good link monsters, obviously play the good ones. And one S4's Justify. It's mainly in here because you can play it and it's not too bad. It can win you games, but it obviously has some big flaws from time to time, and it's not crucial to the strategy, but obviously it's a nice addition if you have it. Other cards that you could consider if you don't want to run the S4's monster, then there's no reason not to run Pot of Extravagance because a +1 is very, very neat in any form of control deck. And if you feel like you don't get your play starters often enough, Pot of Prosperity, obviously a card that is worth running. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, I hope you have a good day.